So you remember this new Ministry of Truth that the U.S. government created, the Disinformation Governance Board. I love these CIA names. They're so classy. So here's the headline from The Guardian. Homeland Security pauses new disinformation board amid criticism. So just a few weeks after they announced this disinformation board, again, what does that even mean? Right? Because they call anything they don't like disinformation. So people said that this is just the Biden administration's way of censoring, silencing dissent. Okay, and it's not just the Biden administration. It's the past couple of years you've been seeing this in the West, where you say something that the establishment doesn't like. They say, "Oh, that's Russian disinformation." Oh, this is a Kremlin talking point. That's how they silence people, right? They don't know how to argue and address arguments, so they shut you down and they say you're this and that. So it turns out that they've put this on pause, and the woman that was set to lead it, Nina Yankovic, resigned. She's actually resigned. She's gone. And you remember I showed you that TikTok video where she's not dancing, but singing and about combating disinformation. Well, let's take a look at her interview here and what she has to say about this whole situation.
Governance board. It would be an entity to work to combat the very real, dangerous issue of disinformation online and elsewhere, with a stated goal to, quote, coordinate countering misinformation related to Homeland Security. Now, the woman appointed to lead that effort is a woman named Nina Jankowicz. She's a former disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center and the author of the book, How to Lose the Information War, which is about international relations and disinformation. But almost immediately after the announcement, a right-wing frenzy ensued, helped along, I think, by the vaguely ominous title of the office, and she found herself on the receiving end of a concerted campaign by the very same forces disinformation her office would face, now attacking her and undermining her credibility with wild conspiracy theories and lies. It was so much that yesterday, DHS announced the formation of the office had been put on hold, and this morning, Nina Jankowicz resubmitted her resignation. Tonight, she joins me for her first television interview. Thanks for joining us. First, just to start at ground level, what was this thing that was announced, and what was it going to do?
Well, Chris, it was going to do exactly what you said. All these sensationalist narratives about what the board was, what people thought the board was going to do are completely wrong. It was a coordinating mechanism. It was meant to, make sure that the very large agency that is the Department of Homeland Security, that people were talking to each other within it. So let me give you an example. FEMA, the agency that handles disasters and environmental issues, would often counter misinformation about natural disasters. And let's say a foreign adversary like Iran or China perhaps would put out a narrative that says, oh, here's how you get out of this city, or here's where you can find disaster aid. And that could put people really into danger, their lives into danger. That's the sort of disinformation and misinformation that we were looking to.
Whoa. Hold it right there, lady. What did she just say? I already knew it's going to be some nonsense when she's like adversary, an adversary like Iran or China. Listen, man, Iran or China are not adversaries. The United States and the West are adversaries to them. Iran is not sanctioning American citizens to make sure they can't have medical equipment and food and cancer medicine. Let's get that straight, okay? Iran is not the one that's surrounding the United States with aircraft carriers and military bases and sabotaging nuclear sites. And then what does she say? The Iranians or Chinese are going to exploit a disaster to tell Americans how to get out in a way that would risk their lives. What nonsense is that? That is literally disinformation. She just made up an obscene lie accusing two sovereign countries of something they have never done and would never do. This is ridiculous. This is really a new low. That's really a new low. Come on, man. Come on, that's really absurd. Usually they say something like, well, Iran is trying to hack the election, and Russia is sending memes to influence the outcome of the presidential election. That's the kind of nonsense they say, which is already bad enough. This is really a new low. Honestly, putting civilians in harm, that's something we, the West, do to Iranian civilians, not the other way around. Don't get this twisted. Don't get that twisted. Come on.
support the department in addressing, to make sure that they had best practices, and most importantly, to protect Americans' freedom of speech, civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy while we were doing all of that work. So every characterization of the board that you've heard up until now has been incorrect. And frankly, it's kind of ironic that the board itself was taken over by disinformation when it was meant to fight it.
So just to sort of give the argument on the other side, I mean, when I was watching this play out and I was watching the frenzy develop, right, I sort of was running this thought experiment of like, well, how would I feel back in, 2005 under the Bush administration if the Bush administration had announced this thing with this title, right? And they had appointed someone that I thought was, a Republican or conservative.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. And listen, let me be very clear. George Bush did create the Department of Homeland Security, under which her disinformation board was going to have its mandate. Okay, so it's not a hypothetical. The whole point of the Department of Homeland Security was to have some, bureaucratic, authoritarian takeover to justify spying and mass surveillance, and even the name itself, the Department of Homeland Security. It sounds like something from 1984. And at the time, people were already questioning, like, what is this supposed to do? Why do we need this? And it was another one of the tools that the Dick Cheney and George Bush administration created to justify the war on terror, to justify the Patriot Act, the mass surveillance, all of this stuff, right? So that's very important. And he asks a poignant question here. Let's see what they say.
Taken over by disinformation when it was meant to fight it.
So just to sort of give the argument on the other side, I mean, when I was watching this play out and I was watching the frenzy develop, right, I sort of was running this thought experiment of like, well, how would I feel back in, 2005 under the Bush administration if the Bush administration had announced this thing with this title, right? And they had appointed someone that I thought was, a Republican or conservative. And it felt like, OK, well, here's the use of the state, right? State power to patrol speech or to claim things are disinformation that they don't like. Like, what do you say to people that say, look, even if your intentions were good or this was just bureaucratic, that even stepping into this zone poses some non-crazy alarms for folks that are concerned about that kind of thing?
Well, I fully understand Americans' concerns that they don't want government involved in policing speech. And good news, this initiative wasn't involved in policing speech, and neither was I. I think, it is important that our government...
And neither was I.
Get involved when we have real threats to our national security. So it's not just things like election interference, which we've seen and which DHS has combated also, but threats at the border, disinformation that is driving people to migrate here, disinformation that could affect critical infrastructure like our financial systems and gas pipelines. All of that has very real effects for the safety of Americans. And frankly, I think DHS and other federal agencies need to be involved because this problem isn't going away. It's only getting worse.
Well, let's talk about
what kind of a bloody answer was that? He's asking you about, the way that this comes across, and did come across that people think this is some kind of authoritarian, mandate, to police speech. And she's like, yeah, but it's about people coming to the border. What? You didn't say. Did you hear any of this? Please tell me something. Did we hear any of this stuff a few weeks ago when they started it? To me, this sounds like backtracking. She's trying to come up with stuff that no one ever mentioned, and acting like it's a threat. Like migrants coming at the border is now something about disinformation. I want to be very clear because, when Biden and Kamala Harris were trying to get elected against Trump, they were saying like, oh, this is a guy that locked up kids in cages, and he did, right? He did, and so did they. And he's turning back vulnerable people. You remember Kamala Harris? She's like, this is inhumane. And then when they get in, they're like, do not come, do not come. So where's this disinformation coming from? If that's the point that she was raising, all right, that's what I'm understanding from her, that there's disinformation about people being encouraged to come. Well, again, Kamala Harris was certainly telling people to come, and then she changed her mind all of a sudden. Now, me personally, you know what I think about imperialism and colonialism and how it drives refugees and so on. I'm not going to get into all of that, but I don't understand what her answer is and how it relates to his question.
Combat, because I think that word is interesting, right? Like, what does that mean tangibly, right? If when you say combat disinformation, because obviously we're having an incredibly intense meta debate about speech and platforms, regulation and moderation there, of them. So what is your vision, or what would the board's vision or anyone's vision from a government potential perspective be to combat disinformation?
A lot of the work that DHS has been doing for over a decade now is just about putting good information out there. Again, information about where Americans can seek disaster aid, information about where Americans can vote, information about the border not being open, for instance. So that's one thing that I had hoped that we would do. And I've spent a lot of my career, testifying both before Republicans and Democrats on both sides of the aisle, advising foreign governments about how to build resilience in populations. People need the tools to navigate today's information environment. It's incredibly overwhelming. And so I had hoped that we would do some creative programs to equip people with the tools they need to find that information in today's information environment. Not to say what was true or false. That was never the intention.
One more question on this, and then I want to ask about your personal experience. But how is disinformation as a category different than just stuff that's wrong? Right? Because sometimes I think that term itself.
All right, guys, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop this right there. I think we've heard more than enough. Really, really interesting. I'm being sarcastic. Yes, it's British humor. She was very interesting. Here's the new press secretary for the White House.
In that period, but the departments work across several administrations to address disinformation that threatens the security for our country is critical and will continue. So that work is going to continue.
So if it's pausing because you think the board was mischaracterized, then the disinformation board is being shut down because of disinformation? Is that what's happening here?
Look, I mean, the board was put forth for a purpose, right? To make sure that we really did address what was happening across the country when it came to disinformation.
And it's okay right now, 75 days.
It's just it's going to pause. There's been a mischaracterizations from outside forces, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to pause it, and we're going to do an assessment. But the work doesn't stop. We're still going to continue the work. The DHS is still going to continue the work.
Okay. There's a bulletin now.
In that period, but the departments work across several administrations to address disinformation that threatens the security for our country is critical and will continue. So that work is going to continue.
So if it's pausing because you think the board was mischaracterized, then the disinformation board is being shut down because of disinformation? Is that what's happening here?
Look, I mean, the board was put forth for a purpose, right? To make sure that we really did address what was happening across the country when it came to disinformation.
And it's okay right now, 75 days.
It's going to pause. There's been a mischaracterizations from outside forces, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to pause it, and we're going to do an assessment. But the work doesn't stop.
He thought he was being really funny with that, right? Oh, the disinformation board is stopping because of disinformation? yeah, good job. Here's from the BBC. 3-week-old Biden disinformation task force paused. The DHS has paused a controversial task force on disinformation. Critics pilloried the Disinformation Governance Board when it launched 3 weeks ago, warning it could be used to censor free speech. Nina resigned, we know that. And the task force has sparked a massive outcry, largely from the right. This is what I love. It's every time someone criticizes them, they say, "Oh, it's a white supremacist, or it's the right, or it's the Russians." It's not allowed to be anybody else, right? It's not possible. It's not possible that someone on the left could criticize this thing, and I mean the real left. I don't mean the American left. The United States had a real left about 100 years ago. It doesn't have one anymore. Certainly not in the mainstream, right? Certainly not in the mainstream or in government. There's no left. The Democrats are right wing and so are Republicans. They're just different flavors. And even then, it's like splitting hairs. It's like Anyway, I really think this is nonsense because they make it sound like it's some right-wing thing, like, oh, how dare they? How dare they be against a speech policing mandate? Yes, this must be a right-wing endeavor, boy. I'm just skimming through this very quickly. It's nothing interesting, guys. It's nothing interesting, and honestly, just because they're putting it on pause, I think this doesn't make any difference. It's not like just yesterday they invented this whole mantra of, well, if you say something wrong, we'll shut you down. They've been doing this for years, man. Scott Ritter, who I was just talking to, they banned him from Twitter, right? Who else did they ban? Pepe Escobar. And again, what did they say in the beginning? Oh, this is just for Alex Jones. Alex Jones is cuckoo. Who's going to defend Alex Jones? Who cares about this guy? Ban him. And then, it starts like that. And then who's it used against? The left, of course. So you see, they don't need this disinformation governance board for anything. It's actually quite useless in the grand scheme of things because they can get away with calling things disinformation already. And they have been doing that. The media does this. The media fulfills this role in the first place. Do you understand? So they don't really need a government mandate to do it for them. And especially when you have state media. And when I say state media, you have corporations that own the state and own the media. So again, it's corporate state media, whatever you want to call it. That's what legacy media is in the United States and Europe. They're really just mouthpieces for the state. So when a story comes out they don't like, for example, I use the Hunter Biden thing, but that's really just one example. They can just credit it, and they have people from the CIA sign a letter and say, oh, this is Russian disinformation, and then the Twitter will ban the link as well, and then the media will come in. So do you see how all these different organs, all of these different bodies, they work together for a common purpose, which is to shut things up that they don't like. And how do they do that? They characterize it as disinformation. So she was kind of useless, honestly, and I think attracting too much attention to what they usually practice, right? It's actually quite stupid that they did that, because if your goal was to fight disinformation, and when I say that, I don't actually mean fighting disinformation. I mean what their definition of that is. So if you're the establishment and you want to silence critics, you don't do something like this. You just keep it going the way it is now because it's working very well, unfortunately. So I think she drew too much attention. That's why she shut it down. But that's just my take. That's just my opinion on this. I think the most important thing that you should remember is that this Disinformation Governance Board was under the Department of Homeland Security. And the fact that everyone is fine with the Department of Homeland Security tells you everything. It tells you everything you need to know, because it's a creation of the Bush regime, of the Dick Cheney regime, which was kept by Obama, kept by Trump, kept by Biden, and it still exists. And it performs a similar task and fulfills a similar role. So really, this was kind of drawing too much attention. It was completely... They put a clown in charge of it. No offense. Sorry, again, I don't know her personally, but I don't want to be mean, but... come on, this we all know what this was for. I think it's a bit weird that she's saying now it's about fighting, hurricane disinformation. So what dribble is this? Did you guys hear that mentioned once? Did you hear anything about FEMA when they created this thing a few weeks ago? Did you hear one word about telling Americans how to evacuate a disaster zone? Where did they get this from? And I want to tell you something. If that's the case, why would you shut it down? You've just outlined how important this is. Why would you shut it down? I would not shut that down if that was actually the purpose. So, there's a very important thing to do, and honestly, they're bullshitting us because she's tiptoeing around the issue of, censoring politics, and that's what it was really for. But again, they can get away with it the way things are.